I just started having not doubts about God, but just doubts about my career and should I really be a pastor. I always felt kind of weird being a pastor. Do you remember the old Sesame Street thing? They'd put 4 objects and they'd sing the song, "One of these things is not like the other." Every time I went to a pastor's conference, I was like, one of these guys is not like the others. Because, they're all these 60-year-old men with Amish beards and, all these kinds of things. So I wanted something, where I could really utilize my gifts and things. And so started out into the professional speaking world, ended up with really 3 great mentors that really catapulted my career, just being next to them. And so then I just started experiencing a lot of questions, a lot of doubt, and shook my fist at God a lot. And, why is this happening? Why is this going on? All these kinds of things. And so it was never really, I renounce my faith. It was not anywhere near that. It was just struggle. It was just a weight and a burden that I just felt a lot. And it's so thankful. People talk about the dark night of the soul. I had a dark decade of the soul.
Fire and water meet, going down deep. Say, oh, bury me, carry me, oh, far beneath. Oh, fire and water meet, watching me think everything free. Yeah. Oh, everything free. Down to the river. Down to the river.
Time for another episode of Sheepdog and Shepherd. We are out here on the beautiful Atlantic Ocean in the wonderful free state of Florida. And I am one of your hosts, Kyle Reyes.
My name's Greg. I'm your co-host, and I'm a pastor at the Church of 1122 and a chaplain with the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office.
And I'm Chris Widener.
All the way out from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Why don't you give everybody a little bit about your background, what you do?
Yeah, I spent 14 years as a pastor, 88 to 2002, and since 2002 I've been writing and speaking full-time, 2,500 speeches in the last 20-something years, and that's primarily what I do. I write some books as well.
2,500, that's it? Can you step up your game a little bit?
Yeah,
now?
I know. I know friends, they got like 4,000 under their belts.
So Greg and I were out in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Chris put together this incredible men's event. We had a few dozen guys from all over the country come together and worship and prayer and study. And what a cool event, man. But I've really gotten to know you very well over the last few years and found that not only do you have a heart for God and for service, but you also have an incredible heart for those who serve. So why don't we dive a little bit into your backstory?
Yeah, so when I was a pastor at a church in Issaquah, Washington, a little suburb. Most people don't know, but it's the international headquarters of Costco. You started out in Kirkland, they moved to Issaquah, but everything's called Kirkland brand because Issaquah milk just probably wouldn't sound too good. Okay. So Issaquah is a burgeoning little city, and I was there, and they have a small little police force. Well, when I started, there was like 23. There's probably 43 cops now. But they had no chaplain program. And they had this old-time police chief. He'd been there for 40 years. Everybody in town knew him. And so we went to lunch one day, and I said, we got to start a chaplaincy program. And he goes, done, let's do it. Like, he didn't even have to run it by anybody. So they put me through all the paces and, all those kinds of things, background checks, make sure I'm not going to kill anybody. And so I ended up spending 7 years as a police chaplain for the Issaquah Police Department and, did a lot of ride-alongs. I've spent a couple thousand hours in a cop car with them and, primarily doing death notifications, things like that. But no, I always think about police, fire, EMTs. They never get called when everything's going great. Yeah. Like 911 never says, 911, what's your emergency? No emergency, just want to let you know everything up here on Elm Avenue is going fantastic. Can you thank the cops for me? Every single time they get called, it's something bad, it's an emergency, it's a problem, and the weight that our first responders experience simply because their entire job is responding to crisis really gave me a heart for them and to minister to them as well.
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah.
How long did you do the chaplaincy with them?
7 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how much trauma did you experience for those guys? Did you have to walk through a lot of trauma with them?
Well, the nice thing was it was kind of like being a cop in Beverly Hills. You know, there wasn't a lot of gang shootouts or anything like that. I think we had one murder in 20 years or something like that. But, you know, still it's the pressures. You know, you look at other professions like counselors or customer service, you know, people only all day long, problem. And whether it's great problems or it's even small problems, it really weighs down. It weighs you down. And so even a police officer in a, you know, higher end, less crime area is still experiencing those kinds of things. But mainly with families who, you know, someone committed suicide or their child was at college and that police department calls our police department, then you go knock on the door. It was primarily community-based as opposed to the officers, simply because of that.
Chris, you shared a story at one point about how you went through a tough time in your life and you hit rock bottom.
Yeah.
And man, that story has just always resonated with me because of your takeaway from it. Can you share that story?
Yeah, I had gone through, you know, they talk about a dark night of the soul. I had a dark decade of the soul. And, you know, I was always saved, and I relied on that verse where the Bible says that even when we're faithless, He is faithful. And, you know, I had been a pastor and, you know, all these kinds of things. And I really just started struggling with a lot of things and ended up moving to Scottsdale, Arizona from Seattle, where I'd spent my first 50 years of my life. And this guy says, I don't even know who referred me to this guy, but they said, you got to go talk to this kid, Jonathan. And I said, kid? And he goes, yeah, he's like 32, but he's the #1 like VC for tech stuff in all of Phoenix. So I met him at this little bagel bar. It's well known out in Scottsdale. Met him there, had conversation. Don't remember anything about the conversation. Don't remember anything we talked about. I remember one exchange where I told him everything that I'd been going through. And I said, you know, I've hit rock bottom. And he says, that's fantastic. And I went, what? Like, that's the weirdest response. That's fantastic. And I said, how is that fantastic? He goes, Jesus is the rock. And I went, you know, sometimes Jesus lets you fall all the way till there's only one place left to land. Yeah. And that was like a pivotal moment in my life and started, you know, the back up into the upswing. But no, that's a great story. And I never saw the guy again, never talked to him again, nothing. But, you know, in heaven, he'll find out that one phrase, you know, really changed somebody else's life.
I mean, you went through some tough stuff, man, with the house and your career, and everything shifted. What was the moment that things shifted south and then shifted back north?
Well, there was a house built when I was a junior in high school. Giant mansion, Spanish style, you know, huge gazebos on both ends. We had a party once just on the veranda with 150 people. Swimming pool house, gazebos all the property, like 2 miles worth of walking, you know, paths. We had a 75 rhododendron walking path and half a mile of riverfront. And I drove by that house for 21 years. Every time I drove by, it stopped at the front gate. Front gate was 500 feet long, brick pillars, wrought iron fencing, big double open gates, quarter-mile circular driveway. Every time I drove by it, I said, I'm going to buy this house someday. And when I was 38, I bought it from the original owner. Unfortunately, the original owner didn't, you know, expose a lot of the things that were problems. Long story short, bought it in 2004. 2007, my daughter called me from the pool house, and she said, Dad, there's a hole next to the pool. And we had this decking, but there was one hole where we had some plants so you could see the dirt, and there was a hole in it. So I said, well, I'll look at it tomorrow morning. It was Saturday night. Go out Sunday morning, and I saw this hole, but there was no dirt by the side of the hole. So it wasn't like a dog pawed it out. It just... And I went, well, that's weird. Went to church, came home, and I could now see under the swimming pool. And we were on this bluff above this river, and the whole thing, the bluff started collapsing. Oh, no. And they said, well, it must be the well. Let's shut the well down. Well, it wasn't the well, but I now was without a well. And so long story short, we ended up suing the county because they had come on the property to do some things. And I always say to people, have you ever met somebody that lost $2 million on a house they paid $1.3 million for? And they go, no. And I go, well, now you have, because lawsuits and all these things. And the county basically said, no, it was the previous owner. Well, by the time the whole lawsuits and everything happened, it was beyond the statute of limitations. So there's nothing I could do. So I was stuck with this giant house. And of course, you know, when you have big problems in your life, they can also create relationship problems and financial problems and all these other kinds of things. So I ended up losing that whole thing. And thankfully, it was right as my career was really booming. So, but you know, the bills add up. I was paying $2,500 a month just to have water in a tank that they backfilled in through a faucet just so we could have water. And then just all the other expenses and attorney expenses, those kinds of things. So that was probably the beginning, was in 2007, which created this big financial collapse. And then that created all sorts of other problems, and it just became a big mess.
Chris, let's talk a little bit about your faith and how it got you through that, how it followed you all the way to rock bottom, and then the rise.
Well, you know, it's kind of funny. I got saved when I was 17 and went right into Bible college and became a pastor. Started my first church at the age of 25. Started 2 more churches out of that one over the course of the next 11 years. And then it was really in that time frame when everything started, you know, I just started having not doubts about God, but just doubts about my career and should I really be a pastor? I always felt kind of weird being a pastor. Do you remember the old Sesame Street thing? They'd put 4 objects and they'd sing the song, "One of these things is not like the other." Every time I went to a pastor's conference, I was like, one of these guys is not like the others. Because, you know, they're all these 60-year-old men with Amish beards and, you know, all these kinds of things. So I wanted something, you know, where I could really utilize my gifts and things. And so started out into the professional speaking world, ended up with really 3 great mentors that really catapulted my career, just being next to them. And so then I just started experiencing a lot of questions, a lot of doubt, and shook my fist at God a lot. And, you know, why is this happening? Why is this going on? You know, all these kinds of things. And so it was never really, I renounce my faith. It was not anywhere near that. It was just struggle. You know, it was just a weight and a burden that I just felt a lot. And it's so thankful, you know, people talk about the dark night of the soul. I had a dark decade of the soul. And it took me about 10 years to just really go through everything I had to go through, let God purge me of everything that I wanted as opposed to what He wanted, and really refocus me. And thankfully, like I said, you know, the Bible says that even when we're faithless, He's faithful.
Amen. Chris, you and I have some beef.
Yeah?
So
prime rib, or is it ribeye?
I wish.
I had a ribeye last night. I was thinking of you.
Oh, man.
While you were eating that little pork sandwich of yours.
It was a big pork sandwich.
Well, you mentioned Costco earlier. It's his favorite place to shop, and I have a question before we end the show for you.
Let's come back to that. Let me get this beef out first. So Chris keeps telling me, hey, you got to get this book. You got to get this book. It's a book about God. It's a book about Jesus. It's a book about faith. It's a book about revival. It's a book about empowerment. And I keep buying these books. And now I have the equivalent of what I call the Widener library in my house. And so I grabbed one of them for a flight a few weeks ago. And I said, you know what, I'm finally going to start burning through this library because I've bought like 60 books that Chris has told me to buy. And I started reading the book and I said, I cannot read this book.
Was it A.W. Tozer?
Yeah, holy cow.
As soon as he said I couldn't read the book, I'm like, it's got to be Tozer.
I felt so stupid by the end of it.
But I always tell you, well, first of all, it can't be the Widener Library because the Harvard Library is the Widener Library. So I always tell people, and Pursuit of God is only 110 pages, 120 pages, something like that. I always tell people, don't read the whole book at one sitting. Don't read a whole chapter at one sitting. Maybe read a paragraph at one sitting. Maybe 2 paragraphs.
Well, so you can read because you fall asleep.
No, it's not a matter of falling asleep. It's just that guys like Tozer, and one of my theories is, and I very rarely break this philosophy, I only read dead guys. Like people go, oh, have you heard of this new Christian book? And I'm like, no, never heard of it. Well, what's his name is such and such. Never heard of him. He's got a church of 20,000 people. Never heard of him. Like, I don't read pop culture Christian books because most pop culture Christian books are irrelevant 10 years from now. and or the guy who wrote them is now, gone off the deep end and, doing all these things. One of the biggest writers of the 90s, and I never really read any of his stuff, and everybody said, you got to buy 35, 40 million books. Found out at the end of his career, he'd been sexually assaulting all the women on his staff for 30 years, So I stick to the dead guys because their life has a pillar to it. The things that they teach have a pillar to it. It's long lasting. It's not vogue content. It's timeless truths.
I finally understand the miscommunication. You said, I only read books by dead guys. I thought you were talking about only reading books about dead guys. And I'm like, I read Brad Thor and Jack Carr. This is going to be great.
No, I just like books that have stood the test of time. And guys like Tozer and Murray and all those kinds of guys are the people that I try to read. It's funny because I have sort of a funny, happy-go-lucky personality, but I'm kind of a stoic when it comes to spirituality. Maybe stoic's not the right word, but more of a, I like to read the deeper kinds of stuff. So I'm sorry I turned you on to A.W. Tozer.
The fact that you've got him reading Tozer is pretty impressive.
No, but I'm serious. When I say read a paragraph at a time and just let it sink in, it's a difference between eating, a double cheeseburger meal at McDonald's and eating like a really great hearty meat and vegetable kind of dinner. That's the difference between these writings.
No, this was like eating 4 pounds of turkey and having the tryptophan knock you out for the night, man. Holy cow. But there were a couple of, so I started going through a whole bunch of the books that you recommended. A lot of great content in there, but I got to tell you, man, I keep coming back to Eli turned me on to him years ago. Eli Crane, John Eldridge, Wild at Heart, and he's got some incredible content.
Well, I'm sure I told you to read not Wild at Heart, which was the third in the series, and not the first one, which is Divine Romance, but the middle one, Journey of Desire.
Yep.
And that's probably the one I told you to read. Yes. Yeah, because it was the third grade level, right? I'm kidding.
I think you and Jeff Bezos are working together to get me to keep.
Journey of Desire was a pivotal book in my life because I was reading the book, and I was about halfway through, and my wife said, "How you liking the book?" And I said, "It's great. I know how it ends." She goes, "How do you know how it ends?" And I said, "It ends with me not being a pastor anymore." That was the book that really convinced me that God had put into my heart to go write and speak full time. And so that book really had a profound impact, which is funny because the book that really made Eldridge famous was Wild at Heart.
Right. Well, it was Greg here who taught me all about marketplace ministry and how you don't have to be a pastor or clergy or working within the church to have kingdom impact. And that really...
in fact, it's easier to make an impact. Like when I was a pastor, I used to tell my congregation, 100 years ago, I would have been the most influential guy in this town because everybody went, ooh, it's the pastor, along with all the other pastors. In today's culture, particularly when I was living in Seattle, you tell somebody you're a pastor and they go, oh, hey, gotta go, got a next meeting, right? And so I used to tell my congregation, you have far more influence in the world than I do. My job really is to train you to influence the people that you're working with and involved with. And I really do believe that with all my heart, that pastors have very little influence over anybody other than their flock.
Well, I'll tell you, man, it's like Dragic, right? So Mike, this dude who wrestles gators and brings men out on gator hunts, he'll sit there and drink whiskey with you and curse up a storm, and I'm super good with that because that guy's getting to the hardest of us, right? He's getting to combat vets who are struggling, who see a dude like that and they're like, this is my boy, like this guy's super relatable. They're not gonna walk within 1,500 yards of a church, but then they meet him and these guys are being baptized in a swamp within days. It's pretty incredible, and God uses us all in very unique ways. How can people learn more about your ministry?
They can just go to chriswidener.com. Plenty of ways to find me there. I finally got on TikTok. I've got a couple hundred followers now, so that's kind of cool. But probably chriswidener.com is the easiest way to get a hold of me.
Awesome. Greg, parting thoughts?
Yeah, marketplace ministry, you talked about it. I think Jesus said, follow me. And when we talk about being making disciples, I think it's not about being a pastor. It's not about being in church leadership. It's about being in the streets where the real stuff happens. And so every one of us has an opportunity to do that. So when we follow Jesus, we are actually in the streets doing the grinding work, and we all have that ministry.
Can I add one thing that I think is really, I just really kind of recently learned this. We typically go out to minister to people and we say, we start preaching to them, teaching them the Bible, whatever. I read a story about a pastor whose church was like 300 people, and they went door to door all the time trying to win people to Christ. And then he felt like the Lord said, stop trying to tell people about Jesus, knock on their door and ask them if you can pray for them. Mm-hmm. And their church went from 300 to 3,500 in 3 years because the people didn't feel like, hey, we want to intellectually convert you about something.
Sure.
Instead it was, hey, we're from such and such a church, we just want to meet our neighbors, how can we pray for you? Yeah. And then they go, oh, well, my husband just got diagnosed with this, or whatever, and then God works in them, and then they show up at church. I think the same thing is true in marketplace ministry, not thinking, how do I find the angle to put the right Bible verse into this guy? Just say, hey, anything I can pray for you about? Or, we did a date night the other night, a couple weeks ago, where we went and did, how you go as a couple and you make food, and there's a bunch of other couples, and they teach how to make, we did chicken parmesan kind of thing. And at the end, this owner, he wasn't even there, but the chef was there. And he said, hey, on your way out, there's a valuation sheet. We'd love that. But on your way out, you see that box over there? It's a prayer request box. If there's anything that we can be praying for you about, we would love to do that. Our owner's a Christian. He loves to pray for the people who come here. And I thought, so cool, because it's not offensive, it's not aggressive, but we're here for you, right, other than teaching you how to cook.
Yeah.
Love it. It was a great idea.
Yeah, we were in the book of 1 John the other night at a Bible study, and it's all about one another's, loving one another. So that's what it's all about.
So go ahead. I know you want to close the marketplace talk with his question about Costco.
So Kyle has a scenario he likes to pose once in a while.
So prime ribeye steaks, $24.99 a pound at Costco, right?
Okay.
You know that, you know the price. You go in there, you see the most beautiful prime ribeye steaks you've ever seen in your life, and they're marked as chuck roast at $4.99 a pound. What do you do?
What do you mean they're marked at
They're mismarked.
They're mismarked, accidentally.
Mislabeled.
I'd probably tell the guy. I'd probably say, hey, I think these things are mislabeled.
Thank you. Cut.
That does it for this episode of Sheepdog and Shepherd.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean, think about it this way. You pay $20 for something, and you give them 100, and they give you 5 20s back. What do?
You give them the money back.
Right, so it's essentially the same thing, only it's been converted to beef.
No, it's not. People specifically asked you for $4.99 a pound for $22 for that package of prime ribeye steaks. I'm simply giving them what they asked for. That does it for this episode of Sheepdog and Shepherd. Thank you for hitting that share button. Thank you so much to our friends at pray.com for allowing us the opportunity to continue our marketplace ministry by spreading the gospel to the entire world. Thanks for sharing. God bless you all. God bless America. Costco, thanks for the ribeyes.
There's one part of almost every building that intruders target first: the glass. Even $1 million in locks and cameras won't matter if someone can break through a window in seconds. Our 15 mil security laminate reinforces your glass, buying you time when every second counts. Whether at home, at school, or on the job, if keeping your people and property safe is your priority, this is something you can't afford to overlook. Call today for your free security consultation. And to make things even better, on any project over 250 square feet, we'll donate $1,000 in additional laminate, because your safety matters to us.